All right, everybody, happy Tuesday. Today is Tech Tuesday. This will be a weekly segment where I go over different tech questions about the solar industry, about different products, breaking down both brands and also just general technology in general. So today we are going to take the very first step in Tech Tuesday by talking about the biggest tech that you should know the difference between in the solar industry, and that is inverter technology. So over 90% of the inverter market right now is produced or is covered by two companies. Those two companies are SolarEdge and Enphase. All right. So over 90% of residential installs are use one of these two inverters. They are dramatically different in the type of how they invert this electricity. So SolarEdge is a centralized inverter, whereas Enphase is a micro inverter. What we'll talk about today is the pros and cons of the two, where we think the market may be going moving forward, and if there's really a benefit between either one. All right, so let's get into it. So let's first talk about what is an inverter. Solar panels, they generate direct current. So they generate DC electricity. Our homes use AC. So in order to turn a direct current into an alternating current, we require some inversion. So what an inverter does is it takes direct current, inverts it into alternating current, and now the home can utilize that electricity, or the homeowner can utilize that electricity within their home. So two different technologies here. One is a centralized inverter, which means you have one inverter for the entire solar array. Whereas the microinverter, if you have one inverter per panel. So if you have 25 panels, you have 25 inverters. And why these two technologies differ is it all comes back to they both were trying to solve a problem with the original solar technology, which original solar had string inverters. Okay, and what a string inverter is let's say these are solar panels, they were connected in a string. The big drawback of string inverters in the old technology is that you were only ever as strong as your weakest link. So let's say a cloud was shading this panel, and this panel was producing at 50% of its maximum. All the rest of these panels would be at 50%. So as you can imagine, that's not very efficient. Clouds come in, different times of the day have different shadows on different parts of the system. And so this problem needed to be solved to increase the efficiency of all residential solar. And both of these companies solved it in two different ways, but with the same general outcome. SolarEdge, they used what's called a power optimizer, or PO for short. And so a power optimizer is an optimizer, which means that it optimizes the panel, an optimizer that goes on each individual panel. This allows each panel to operate independently of this entire string. Then all of that electricity still comes into a centralized inverter. Now with the microinverter instead said, hey, instead of optimizing these panels and then still inverting through a central inverter, why don't we take this inverter, shrink it down, and put it on every single panel, making, in essence, 25 individual solar systems. This is 25 panels, one inverter. This is 25 individual solar systems because you have panel and inverter both on the same within the same circuit. So that was Enphase's solution. Let's talk a little bit about the outcomes of these two different products and what they actually mean. One of the big things on the inverter side is that the inverter is the biggest cost of the solar system. So the inverters cost way more than the actual panels. So it's very important when you're looking at a long-term investment that your inverter cost is priced into that. Your SolarEdge standard warranty is a 12-year warranty. Now, it is upgradable to 20/25 years, and many companies will do that automatically. It's just part of their offering. But the other one small drawback of the centralized inverter is that it's in ranges. So this inverter would be an inverter that could support 21 to 30 panels. And it's not usually panels, it's kilowatts. It might be like a 7 to a 10 or whatever that number is. But just to give you an idea of kind of how it works, this inverter would support 21 to 30 panels. So if you wanted to come back and let's say this was a 25 panel system, you could only add an additional 5 panels. Let's say you got an electric vehicle, a hot tub, whatever the issue is, you can only add 5 more panels because this inverter is only rated for 21 to 30 panels or a certain amount of wattage. Whereas with the microinverters, you can come back and add 1 panel, 37 panels, 12 panels, as far as the system's concerned. Now you'd have some concerns potentially with your own power unit. That's the breaker box on the house. That's a different story. Neither one of these would affect that. But with this, you in theory could add as many panels or as few panels as you wanted moving forward because it's fully modular, versus this is still in a string and still has a limitation on the low and the high side. The other kind of advantage for the in-phase is the replaceability. When you have one centralized inverter, should something go wrong, maybe it's at year 25 or year 13, etc., you're going to have to replace the entire centralized inverter. Versus over here, if one inverter went bad and let's say it was out of warranty or whatever the case may be, you'd only have to replace that one inverter. The rest of the system would still be working. Now, advantages for SolarEdge, generally more cost effective. Now, it's not a huge difference in the grand scheme of things for a lot of people's opinion, but microinverters do tend to be a little bit more expensive than a centralized inverter option. It really depends on the area, but anywhere between 10 to 20% more expensive. The other kind of critique on the microinverter, which is debatable depending on who you talk to, is that they don't perform as well in high heat areas. According to Enphase, that was a previous generation problem, but some people say that they would prefer in like the super hot markets like Phoenix and Las Vegas, they prefer centralized inverters because they don't want inversion going on top of the rooftop as opposed to maybe inside the garage or on the side of the home. But as far as what the data shows on that, it does appear that Enphase has largely solved that issue with their newer generation IQ7 and IQ8s, and it doesn't seem to be an issue. But overall, both of these are very strong solutions in the inverter market. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, they do capture about 90% of the entire market. So with you adding solar to your business, most of the time, you're going to be at the whim of what your solar installer is going to be using already. So it's very important when you speak with them, you ask what they're using, and you understand the pros and cons of both, so you can give that education to the homeowner. Some solar companies actually install both, so it's really just going to depend on your solar installer. So if this was a video that you found helpful, make sure you subscribe to this channel, as I'll continue to do Tech Tuesdays every Tuesday, and I will go more in depth moving forward into the different types of panels, other things outside of panels and inverters, such as load controllers and anything else just around the solar industry and the tech industry as well. If you're interested in learning how you can seamlessly add solar to your roofing business, feel free to text the word demo to 303-222-7133. Adam Benson, the Roof Strategist, and I partnered together to create a Roof with Solar success formula that has education on all of this, as well as how you can add solar to your roofing business as easy as possible. Look forward to learning together and keep teaching you guys everything I know in the solar space. Talk to you guys soon.